This one I just wanted to open up completely to you guys, the Sync Academy members that might have some questions about sync licensing, about music libraries, about business stuff. If you guys did not see, I released this morning a video on my channel that we will be starting our next Sync 60 challenge this coming Monday. So lots of work and lots of preparation ready for that. And I hope if you guys have participated with us before, you will just participate again. But if you have not, I just wanted to open up. Hold on, I gotta get the Sync Academy members muting that might have. I already knew there would be a problem. We're good now. Small problems, we're good. If you have not participated with us for Sync 60, then I do encourage you to jump in with us on this one, because this is basically, I think, one of the most productive times of being a Sync Academy member. This is when you can really set yourself that realistic and achievable goal for 60 days in front of you and be held accountable through our platform here, through our progress chart that we put on the Sync Academy platform, to ensure that you're going to get that stuff done, because we all know how easy it is to get lazy, to kind of say you want to do something and then not do it, get distracted, life gets in the way, family gets in the way, work certainly gets in the way. So with Sync 60, hopefully we can give you some of the tools and resources, and most importantly, the accountability through our community to make your goal a top priority for you, to ensure you get it done. So a lot of members participate with us, and they find that actually the goals they set for themselves were actually way too lofty, way too ambitious. And they realized as the 60 days goes on, they had to really get more realistic and get something that's much more achievable for them. And that's not a failure. That's actually a success, because that means you're now more aware of yourself. You have a lot more knowledge about what you can actually do with your skills and with your schedule and your obligations. And if you're just dreaming, thinking you can get ahead of yourself, you'll never succeed in this business. You really need to come back down to earth and realize, like, okay, maybe I can only get 3 tracks done in the next 60 days. And there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's where you are, just accept that that's where you are. And maybe Sync 60 will allow you to discover that for yourself. Of course, for the next Sync 60 challenge, maybe you want to up that to 5 or 6 tracks. And it's a progress, right? And every time you do this, you can get a little bit better. And of course, with everything, just like when you first learned to ride a bike, the first time it's wobbly, the first time it's really uncertain and you're really scared to do it. But the more and more you do it, the quicker you get at it, the more that you have this kind of built-in knowledge about how to, achieve your goals and how to succeed. And now the most important thing is you're building a history of not letting yourself down, of actually saying, I'm going to get something done, and you actually get the thing done. That's actually the most important thing you're going to get out of this, that building of your confidence, right? And having sort of a culture within yourself and a history within yourself of knowing that you can set your mind to something and you can achieve that thing. Because so many of us do that thing where we say we're going to get something done, forget it, fail on it, just flake out on it, get distracted. And then what that does to us is anytime in the future we want to get something done, we kind of start to go, well, I don't know, you're not really the type of person that follows through on your goals. You're not really the type of person that can execute. And that's a really bad self-defeating, voice in your head, basically, that can sabotage you. And it's basically a form of self-sabotage. So we want to get away from that pattern, and we want to start putting a more productive and healthy pattern in front of us, which is about getting things done and holding ourselves accountable for those goals that we set for ourselves. So with that being said, welcome, Mike and Trevor. Let's check in with you guys, see how you guys are doing today. Trevor, how don't you start? Let us know what's going on in your world right now.
Not much. Kids wake me up super early, so I usually go on a jog really early. So I've been awake for a while. I'm just ready to answer some questions. I'm really curious about. I don't get to answer a lot of questions like directly, so this will be kind of cool. I usually get some here and there, but this will be kind of fun.
Awesome, man. I'm excited too. How about you, Mike? How you doing?
Good. Yeah, I'm pretty excited to get some feedback, answer some questions for some people, and yeah, I don't know, been surprisingly, I don't want to say surprisingly, but excitingly very busy for the past couple of weeks, so which is kind of good since for the most part it's been a little bit slow during this pandemic, so it seems like things are starting to get back to normal and start to pick up again. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so those of you that are watching right now, I know we got about 20 or so of you guys that are watching. Make sure you start putting your chats in the box so that we can start getting to them. And it looks like, Michael, you are the first one up. So we're going to go ahead and start with yours. So how this is going to work is I will read out your guys' questions. If it's something that we've covered many, many times before, we might skip over your question. I might just point you guys towards some tutorials or the FAQ section within Sync Academy. I don't want us to have to repeat multiple things, that we've talked about many times, or that we have other resources already pointing you towards. And then if I feel that maybe one or the other of these guys would be better suited to answer them, I will point it in the direction. But if you guys want to directly ask them, just say, hey, this is a question for Trevor, this is a question for Mike. And so we want to make sure that you can get the question right to them if you'd like to do that as well, okay? Or if it's for me, just say it's for me. It doesn't matter. So Michael's question. Looks like this is for Trevor. I've been hearing more and more references in top 40 songs to 70s funk disco and 80s synth pop. Do you think these trends will translate to what libraries are looking for?
So top 40 songs with those influences. Yeah. I think we're in this weird stage now where like everything goes. And so the short answer is yes. The long answer is actually, like, while yes, that's popular, I don't think those things will die. I think we're going to have lots of different genres that are like we're at the same time, we're going to have things with 90s influence. Like a perfect example is around the same time we've had a lot of, like when, what's his name? Bruno Mars had that 90s remake sounding song, Gold Magic or Magic, something like that. It was super 90s. But at the same time, 80s synth sounding stuff was also popular. And right now, like 70s funk sounds are kind of getting into the mix. And so I think that like it's all just kind of going to happen constantly, and just pay attention to what's going on like today. But I don't think there's a lot of in and outs apart from like heavy fad stuff. Like 80s synthwave had a big explosion when, what was it? What was it called?
Stranger Things, really.
Stranger Things, yep. Yeah. Stranger Things, and then that Drive movie. Both of those had kind of brought those into the forefront, but then they've really died down now. Nobody really wants to listen to it too much anymore. That kind of stuff will always happen, but like the hybrid top 40 stuff is just going to kind of have its constant pick of just random stuff. So I don't think you're going to really, I think a lot of it is super evergreen nowadays. That didn't used to be before. Like, we're not going to have, like, when you think of 70s, there's really only one thing you think of, but now not so much. So,
just to add on to that really quick too. A lot of times when you see like a big trend that happens, like when Stranger Things came out. So usually what happens is, with all the libraries that are out there and all the composers working for those libraries, everybody starts writing that music, and then the supply for that basically gets filled within like a week or so. So for instance, like when this pandemic hit, everyone was looking for, somber piano, like melody kind of stuff, right? For all the PSAs and stuff like that. And I remember there was like a lot of searches going on for the first week, but then everybody had already filled that supply up within a week. So just kind of watch out for those really like, what do you call it? Those like big trends that happen in and out, and try to find those genres that are that can be more timeless. Now those trends can always come back and everything like that, but like a lot of times when those happen, the supply just gets filled pretty quick.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And I would just agree with both of these guys that like everything's cyclical in the music business. It's like whatever's hot right now is usually a throwback to what was hot 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it's just always changing. And there's just always a new throwback. I don't know if I can ever say like it's always every 30 years that sound comes back, because it seems like it's a little bit more unpredictable than that. But you definitely hear now that genres are merging and we're kind of pulling back from the old and bringing into the new. So that's just always going to happen. I think just getting used to that and getting prepared for that is just a way to go forward with it. Next up, we have one from Chase. And maybe Trevor or Mike, you guys can go for this one. Given the choice to opt in for blanket licenses, this is with a music library, can that track still be sold directly, earning a sync fee? Or are sync fees only applicable for tracks that are chosen to opt out of blanket licenses? In other words, if your tracks are accepted into a library under this blanket license agreement, is there any chance that that track could get a sync fee for any opportunity? Trevor, why don't you start with that one?
Yeah, no, for sure. So blanket licenses are usually are for certain, like either certain shows or certain networks, stuff like that. So for example, the track might get thrown into a blanket for, I don't know, ESPN network. So in that sense, there won't be any sync fees, but that track also might still get used in some like big movie or something, and there's a sync fee in that scenario. So just because it's in one blanket one place doesn't mean it's not going to get like a sync fee in another place. The blankets are usually just client specific. Yeah.
Cool. Mike, anything to add on that?
I mean, really, at the end of the day, like when you it depends on the contracts, but when you have that opt-in clause, they're basically giving you the option to, which is kind of cool that a library would give you a separate option and be like, hey, listen, we do a lot of blanket deals. Would you like to include your track in it or not? So most, at least my experience, most libraries that I've dealt with don't really give that option, and then you just find out like later that it was part of a blanket deal that, and which is fine, you still get your royalties and everything like that. But,
Yeah. And a cool thing about blanket stuff too is in my experience, like I've had tracks where they'll get thrown into a blanket and I don't see any upfront money, but man, they use it like crazy. It'll get thrown into like every episode of a show, like for the whole season. And then like a year later, my royalties are just like, poof, they just skyrocket, because in those scenarios, they're kind of looking at it as like, okay, we'll use it a ton, but we're not going to pay like 20 sync fees for one season. So instead we'll do a blanket, which is pretty cool for writers because their writers, just go out to the writers. And so in a lot of senses, when it comes to certain clients, whether it's, sports or reality or whatever, like blankets are really good for royalties.
Yeah. And also, if you think like streaming services like Netflix, when I was an editor over at Netflix, that was all their rollover trailers, over their titles on their app and everything like that. That was all using blanket deals. So, and that makes it easier for the editors too, because we can just pick whatever we want and not have to worry about, there's no negotiation on sync fees and stuff like that. And then, however that translates to the library and then to the composer is whatever is specific to whatever their deal is.
Cool. Awesome. Let me take this next one. So this is from Josian. The question is, say the genre I'm specializing in with a library is rock. How would the transition go to other genres? Would libraries ask me to do an EDM, or is this something that would need to come first for me to branch out? So I can tell you in my experience, it probably happens in all different types of ways. In my experience, Josian, when I went into a library, and I was usually either just the rock guy or maybe the EDM guy, a lot of times what would happen is the library would say, hey, Jesse, we know that you do rock, but we're also looking for something a little bit more like this. Can you give that a shot? And usually they would come out to me and say, we want you to kind of like branch out and try something else here and see if it works for you. You can also always offer your secondary or third genre specialties to the library if you feel that they might actually be interested in getting that kind of music placed. And of course, you need to be realistic and honest with yourself. If you just started learning how to produce hip hop and it's not really there yet, probably just because you're excited that you're learning this new genre, it's probably not the time to start introducing that to your library yet, right? So if you feel very confident that your secondary genre is just as strong as your primary one, which is rock, it's not a bad idea to just give them a sample and say, just so you guys know, I'm not just the rock guy, I also do this. And let them decide if it's something they want to bring you on board for. But it can be both. It can be the library tells you this is what we're looking for. We have an opportunity. Are you even able to do something like this? And you actually might find some libraries you work with will ask you to do genres you've never worked in, you never even thought about working in. But because you're excited or you're interested in maybe getting that sync fee, you're like, you know what? I've never done this before, but I'm going to give it a shot. So always be open for those kind of things. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. It doesn't mean you're going to be great at it in the beginning, but you might find that just being kind of pushed into these new genres might be a really cool learning exercise for you to expand your boundaries. So I'd say it kind of comes in all different ways for you to kind of branch out. But for sure, for everybody watching, if you're brand new to a library or brand new to sync licensing, go to that one genre though. Stick with one genre. Do not come to them saying, I can do 5, I can do 10, I can do anything. I'm a genreless producer. I know it sounds very attractive, but it's really not. You really need to get down to the niche, one thing that you do really well, okay? Let's move on to the next one here. Nigel had a question, and this is for Trevor. Trevor, this is kind of more about like working with your library through the syndicate. So Nigel, why don't you go ahead and email Trevor directly? Trevor, what's your email?
Responded.
Okay,
I already
cool.
responded to him.
Yeah, let's make sure if it's syndicate stuff, guys, let's keep that out of this chat because we need to make sure that stuff stays within the syndicate or directly between the library, whoever you guys are working with. But thanks for bringing it up, Nigel, but we'll get that taken care of for you. Let's see. Mike, this one's for you. This is from Mansolo108. Mike, I would love to hear more about, or perhaps a video tutorial for the new video game formats and VR specifically, and how to create music for those cutting edge formats. Now, we did release those tutorials about, and it's Robert Gill. Thanks for letting us know, man. We did talk about video game formats. So is there anything more in particular? I don't know, Robert, if there's something in particular. I don't know if you watched... Before we answer that, Robert, make sure you let us know if you actually watched our tutorials that we did release about the video game formats, because that's exactly what we did release. So I want to make sure that you're not asking a question that we've already covered in there. But maybe, Mike, if you can just talk a little bit about formats and how it's a little bit different with video game stuff as opposed to what we've been usually doing for TV film stuff.
Yeah, so just overall, music for video games and VR projects and stuff like that, the thing you have to just remember is that the medium is just not linear. So and it's reactive to whatever the user or player is doing. So when you're watching a TV show or a film, everything is set up on a linear timeline. The story is being told to you by the director or whoever the storytellers are, and everything is just very meticulously placed in a linear fashion. So when it comes to game music, since it's not linear, you kind of have to cater your creation and your assets to that. So the tutorials kind of go through that. I will add that what's coming is with the release of Unreal 5, which is a brand new game engine. That's kind of changing the game right now because its processing power and the speed at which it's rendering and what it's rendering at real time is opening up not only like new doors for what you can do graphically, but musically as well. So there's a lot of talks right now too where taking this nonlinear format is going further in the sense of figuring out how to maybe tailor a score to the player and the play style, so in the sense of kind of using a little bit of machine learning, a little bit of AI, because the new engine can kind of support that. So that's something to watch for. And it's just all like pretty much open. It's just all about like, what do you call it? Like I said, it's nonlinear, so it just kind of fits around the story according to how the player plays.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if you guys are not familiar with this stuff and you want further training, that's why we released all those tutorials. It's in Sync Academy. Just look up video games and you'll see all, I think you did 3 or 4?
It was a 3-part.
3-part, yeah, and we're going to do some more of those in the future too. So lots of great stuff to dive into there. Next up, this is from James Hoare. I've been looking at the plugins and the plugin palettes that you use in your tutorials, and I'm not in a position to buy them at the moment. Are the Logic and Reason factory ones okay to use for now? I can tell you for sure, Logic ones, yes, because I have my entire producing, mixing, and mastering series that's in Sync Academy in those tutorials where I have, I think, 20 different tutorials, and I show you guys from having nothing in my template in my Logic session to having a completed, fully bounced out track with stems and alt mixes and everything. And other than I think I plugged in maybe my guitar and I sang a little bit on it, other than those 2 instruments, everything else was straight up from Logic and the stuff that's built in with Logic 10. So I don't know, Trevor or Mike, if you guys can maybe talk about Reason, what's going on with the Reason, but I can for sure stand behind Logic, high quality stuff coming there.
I mean, I haven't used Reason in over 15 years. So, I mean, at that time, and the rules were a lot different, especially with copyright and stuff like that. I mean, I know somebody that actually landed a commercial just by bouncing out the Reason demo song.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure you heard that story, Trevor.
No, I haven't, but that's crazy.
So
I remember that.
15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, when it came out, someone got away with it. But yeah, no, as far as I think, so the cool thing that I know about Reason is they do have actual producers, like curated producers kind of make sample packs for them, or maybe they grab them somehow, much in the same way that I guess it Splice does or whatever. So I know the sounds there are really high quality, but it all depends on the kind of music you do. Like trailer stuff, you can probably do it just with the stock sounds in either one, but it will take you a little bit more work. So that's really what it is.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've used Reason, but I'm kind of a nerd, so I kind of poke in every once in a while for all that stuff. I would say that like we're at that point now where every DAW, the stock plugins are pretty much you can do anything you need to do. I really believe this to be true for Logic too, especially when it comes to mixing. Like the Logic plugins, when it comes to the compressors and stuff, the compressors and the DS, like all of the mixing plugins in Logic, I think for it's a steal, $200 one-time payment, and you have like pretty much everything you need. But at the same time, so do these other ones. Like a lot of these, there's some really cool plugins in FL Studio, like mixing plugins, because we're talking about mixing plugins in FL Studio. I know Reason, Ableton has some really good, like they have like a multi-band compressor that's really cool. Reason, I'm not completely sure, but I do know that they were pretty focused on their mastering plugins a while back, and I think those are really, if I remember right, those are really good. But as far as mixing, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's a new world out there, guys, and I know that throwing a whole bunch of money at new plugins is not what we all have, of course, but If you need to start somewhere, I personally say Logic Pro, because it's going to be the DAW and the sounds that you need to start creating licensable music. Of course, you're going to want to expand as time goes on, get some different strings, different things you can get involved with. But for a starter pack for $200, I mean, there's really nothing better than that. Of course, you do have to have a Mac. I'm sure there's hacked versions you can get for Windows, but I'm not going to point you guys in a direction to figure that out. But if you want to look into that, there's probably ways to figure that out. But yeah, I would definitely think that Logic is the one that I've it's been my career. It's the DAW that I've used my entire career, so I do recommend it. Zell's asking, does the Sync Academy have a mastering course from start to finish? We actually have multiple mastering tutorials. Zell, we have the one for myself where it is basically a part of that producing, mixing, and mastering series where I walk you through how I created the track, and then I have a series of videos just dedicated to the mixing and mastering process, so definitely you can check those out. But the way that the tutorials are structured in Sync Academy, it's not like we have a mastering course. It's broken up into different genres. So if you're a hip-hop producer, you're going to probably master and mix your tracks different than an orchestral producer, right? And different than a rock producer. So we actually have all the mastering tutorials separated by genre. So when you go look at the tutorials, first look at the genre that's applicable for you. Click on that, then you'll find all the producing, mixing, mastering, transitions, sound effects, all those things that we have for each one of those genres. We wanted to make sure we organized it in a way that if you're just a hip-hop producer, you don't need to go looking through, all the different genres and all the other tutorials, because that's not applicable for you. So that was the best way that we could organize all those tutorials so you could find what you needed as soon as possible, and not make you, go through hundreds and hundreds of videos before you found something that was actually useful for you. So definitely dive into those tutorials, and I think you'll find what you're looking for. This is from Marcus. Is there a difference for libraries if you go with a production brand or yourself as a composer, basically personal name or brand name? Personally, my opinion, doesn't matter at all. What really matters is your music, is how licensable your music is. It doesn't matter if you're John Doe or John Doe Productions Incorporated. It doesn't matter at all. Obviously, whatever brand you want to go with the brand that you feel fits for you. I don't know if Mike or Trevor, if you have any other opinions on those.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say that it kind of depends on the library. There are some libraries, especially now, more and more libraries are starting to kind of brand themselves and look more like record labels as well. So whether that's like a big consideration for the composer or who, for you, like when you're submitting, it really just kind of depends. But yeah, some libraries push their composers or their artists out like as if they're a record label putting their artists out like front and center. Other libraries, it's, doesn't really matter. So
I actually have, okay, so this is something that I've been kind of changing my mind a little bit. I agree with Jesse that right now it doesn't really matter, and it hasn't for a very long time. But in this kind of like trying to separate like the signal from the noise, or, whatever analogy you want to use, you definitely stand out when you do that kind of stuff. Even like if there's a scenario where, I'm getting bombarded with, people DMing me on Instagram or emailing me or whatever, having something for my brain to visually remember, is what a brand is, right? And so if you have that, just in that sense of like perception and stuff like that, I think it would help. Focusing insanely on it is a bad idea. Like, it's not something to like really be crazy focused on, but having that, I think that little extra, I think kind of pokes you through all of a little bit of the noise, just to make you a little more memorable, and to also make it seem a little more professional, seem like you got a little bit more going on. Like, there's a lot, it's mostly about perception, and it really, and in the terms of, as this industry grows and moves forward, I think that, and I know just looking at, my company and how I want, or how I need to be perceived amongst my other competitors, those things might actually be tools as me as a company might be able to use later. I might be able to, use that as a marketing thing to kind of like poke through the noise of one of my sub-publishers, because I got a sub-publisher who has a ton of libraries. How do I stand out through them? Well, I could do you can take some personal branding stuff and kind of go into that realm. So I think it is going to be useful, and a little bit more useful than it used to be. But I also don't, like Jesse kind of said, it's not something to really focus too much on, but having a little bit is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I want to make sure that it's clear that he's talking about having that brand, having that actual company name behind you. That's what he's saying. But again, yeah, and I agree that like it could help with the sort of initial like, oh wow, there's actually a company, or there's a little bit more professionalism here. However, if you come to a library with crap music with a great sounding company name, you're not getting accepted. So just remember that this is not the focus. This is just it could be we're wearing a tie basically to an interview. Same thing having your own website.
Yeah.
That's why I've told you guys to have your own website, because it is the sort of thing that when you show up and you have this professional image, it is a great first impression. However, if you go to a job interview, you dress great and they ask you about, what's your experience? And you're like, well, I've never worked anywhere. I don't know anything about anything. Okay, you look great, but the content is not going to be there for them to want to hire you. And the same thing with your music. If you look great, you got a great sounding company name and a great looking website, and then your music is just demo form, kind of all over the place. It's very vague. It's too noisy, whatever it is, right? You're not going to get in the door just because you had a suit and a tie on. So just make sure that these are sort of dressings, right? These are kind of like sort of the the icing on the cherry on top of the cake, but you need to make sure that you have an actual cake. You need to actually have something of substance there to deliver to them. So that's why that's why I should have clarified that that's the focus. And whether or not, as long as this stuff is, you got the goods and you're bringing that, whether you use a company name or your personal name, it's not too important in terms of making sure that you actually have a licensable product for them. So yeah, I think we're all on the same page on that one. Scott's asking this. Thanks for the awesome tutorial, guys. All of us helped me tremendously. How many different libraries do you guys work with at a time? Well, I can tell you, Scott, in my career, at any given time, I usually was working with 2, maybe 3 libraries at a time, usually just 2. And even between those 2, there was usually just 1 that I was primarily putting a lot of my effort and time into. However, I would maybe have 5 or 6, kind of extracurricular contacts that wouldn't be always asking me for music, but once a quarter or once every 6 months, maybe a music supervisor that I had a friendship with, or somebody who had connections in the ad world would reach out for something. So I have contacts that kind of swirl around me, but they're not around me every single week. So in terms of that day-to-day, week-to-week thing, usually I would say 2, possibly 3 would be the most that I would partner with. You guys have any other insights on that?
100% agree. Yeah.
I've always worked with, usually the way I did it was I worked primarily with one custom music house for ads and stuff like that. Had a second custom music house on the side that, just for other things that, would come up and, not really a primary one. Then I would work with 2 libraries, and much in the same way, one primary, one sort of on the side. Then I always had, tried to put space for, because I run my own company now, so was always developing that catalog and stuff too. And that was kind of like, second tier as well, in the beginning. So.
Yep. As long as you're keeping the number small enough that you can get those personal relationships and you're not just over committing yourself to too many companies. That's something to keep in mind for sure. Z-Man, what are some other common uses for orchestral music besides trailer music? Mike, you want to take that one?
Yeah. There's actually a lot of uses for orchestral music. Advertising is big. It just depends on the brand and what certain brands want, and especially car commercials. Tend to use a lot of orchestral music, various forms of just straight up orchestral or even hybrid music as well. And then you have anything like underscore for scenes in TV show or film. Game music uses or games use orchestral music as well. So there's really a lot. It's just a matter of what, just doing the research on the library and company that you're, trying to work for.
Awesome, man. And we got to do a big shout out. Edmund Red is in the house. Edmund Red is one of our Sync Academy pros. Edmund, good to see you here, man. I hope you're still here. I know this comment was from a couple minutes ago. But Edmund is very, very helpful here in Sync Academy and putting out these just world-class, great tutorials. So thanks for joining us, Edmund. I appreciate it. And let's move on with our next question here. Josh McAdams, I'm finishing album with my band. I'd like to get it into a library. Is my strategy different for this? Specific libraries? I watched the video about this, but I don't know where to start. So yes, I'll definitely start with a little bit of a general direction I can give you for that. If you're going to be going with your band and you have other plans for your music with your band, meaning you want to tour, you want to sell it, you want to stream it, Spotify, whatever you want to do with your band, maybe even also shop it to try to get a publishing deal with a publishing company, you need to be aware that if you get into sync licensing, especially with exclusive libraries, you're going to lose control of your publishing for the most part. Probably just guarantee that 100% of your publishing is going to be controlled by a music library. So first of all, is that okay with all of your bandmates? Because that's basically what you're going to be getting involved with, okay? So if you have other plans for that album in terms of you want to tour it, again, everything that I said before, maybe putting it into a sync licensing library might not be the first place you should go with, right? It might not be, it may or may not. I know you said you watched that entire tutorial, but that tutorial basically walked you through some of the considerations for why you can do a couple of different things. Like one thing you can do to get around this is, as a band, you put out music, like let's say this album, it sounds like it's going to be for your fans, and let's put that in like sort of the public category. That's for your fans, that's where you're going to sell merchandise, touring, all that kind of stuff. Maybe as a band, you want to create other music that's not connected to this public music. It can be completely different. It can be the same style, but just a whole different album or collection or catalog of tracks that it's not for your fans, it's not for the public, it's not for anybody to publicly consume. So it's not going to be associated with your band publicly, but it could be something that you as a band all realize, you know what, we want to make money over here and succeed with our fans, and we want to also succeed with sync licensing. So maybe you can separate those out and create separate catalogs, and that way when you make this music for sync licensing, you're comfortable giving up that publishing, because you're going to be asked to do that more than likely with any exclusive library that you partner with. So, and then of course you guys will be comfortable, you should be comfortable, make sure you have your splits all correctly. So if you guys all contribute to the creative process, you should probably split everything just right down the middle, however many members there are, to make sure it's very, very fair. Split everything in terms of any sync fees, consideration fees, blanket fees, anything you guys earn, and royalties. Make sure you guys are splitting all that kind of stuff to make sure that's very fair. So in terms of specific libraries, there will be certain libraries that will be more interested in working with bands. Another thing you might want to look into is working with a sync agent, because a sync agent will probably not be trying to take any of your publishing in terms of controlling it. They might want to take a percentage of it, usually like 25 to 50%, if they secure a placement for you, but they're not going to require that you assign the publishing over to their company. So maybe you want to look into sync agents. I would definitely look into Mark Freezer at Sync Summit. I think at syncsummit.com. He's basically the guy to go to if you want to learn all about working with sync agents. So those are a couple of the different paths for you to check that out. George, you have a great question, and you call it a newbie question, but it's a great question. So no dumb questions here, George. But what exactly is a sync fee versus any other kind of payment from a library? So a sync fee is what you'll earn, George, when your track gets placed in let's call it a TV show, a commercial, a trailer, a movie, anything, a video game, anything where your track is being specifically selected to be placed into a particular medium, whatever that might be, okay? So a consideration fee is what a library may pay you. They don't always, but they might pay you that when they first accept your tracks into their catalog, okay? So this is before, any placements, okay? So you put together 12 tracks, they accept those 12 tracks from you. Maybe they want to pay you $100 per track. So they give you $1,200 to say, thank you so much for allowing us to exclusively distribute and market your music to the industry, right? So that's a consideration fee. Now, once those 12 tracks are there, let's say a client comes and goes, hey, we've got this big Nike commercial and we think George's track is perfect for it. That's where the sync fee comes in, okay? So I hope that makes sense. There are two different fees that you can earn in this business. Brandon Martinez, I just had 2 non-exclusive libraries hit me up. One library wasn't getting back to me, so I moved on. Then suddenly they both emailed me. How should I approach this? Trevor, why don't you take this one?
Okay, so they're non-exclusive. And I'm assuming they're both hitting you up for the same music, right? Like, so you probably sent them 10 tracks, both of them 10 tracks. If they both emailed you, I guess the one that took this one's where your discretion kind of has to you kind of have to just pick one, because what you're going to have to do is tell one of them, hey, probably the one that hit you up quicker, tell them that they could have the music, and tell the one that took a long time to be like, look, you took too long. I already got that music somewhere else, but I can get you more of stuff just like this, and kind of approach it in the ones that hit you up first or whatever, or quickest, reward them in a way. And then the ones that took a little too long, I think they would understand, depending on how much time. If it was like 2 months, 3 months, I think they'll be pretty understanding of okay, you didn't sit around for 2 months. We get it. That in my opinion, I would hope that they would feel that way. And then you can go to them and be like, look, these tracks aren't available anymore, but I can make some new ones for you, ASAP. That'd be my recommendation.
I dig it.
Yeah,
Mike, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah. So if there are non-exclusive libraries, And if you want to work with both of them, I would first look at the kind of work that they both do. So if they're both doing a lot of like reality shows, TV shows, that kind of thing, I would say pick one, because it's going to get really messy when it comes cue sheet time. Because what's going to end up happening is if you have the same music in both libraries, one of them is going to have to switch the titles to re-register them and everything like that. So that can get pretty messy come cue sheet time for a TV show. Now, if they both primarily do ads, that's not as much of a deal. So, if they both are primarily doing like advertising and commercials and stuff like that, I would work with both of them if they're non-exclusive. So,
cool. I dig it. I think you got what you need there. Miguel's asking about maybe tutorials that we could be adding for, mixing in surround. It's actually not something I have a lot of experience in personally. Mike or Trevor, do you guys have experience in that? Maybe we could throw some tutorials like that.
Not really when it comes to music specifically. Done surround mixing for, the final. And usually, it's the final re-recording mixer and these kinds of things that deals with that. I mean, I guess you can, there's composers out there that work in quad. But like the LFE and the center channel are, as far as music goes, we're supposed to stay away from those channels anyway. So yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think working in stereo is fine. Of course, I think, working in quad or having speakers behind you is like super epic and really inspiring, so if you want to do it for fun, that's, but I mean, I don't know, like as far as tips on mixing in surround, it's mostly just like not to overdo it, because mostly surround mixes are, have to account for the entire program.
Yeah, and we'll see what we bring. Go ahead, man.
Well, no, mine's quick. I was just gonna say, like, I haven't seen hardly anything that has to do with like music in surround sound for libraries. Like, I don't see it really being in demand, or have been in the past in demand really at all. It seems like it's just kind of something like people do for fun. Is mostly what it seems like.
Yeah, it seems like it's more of the actual sound editor for a film that'd be dealing with that, and they would be throwing the music into the surround mix wherever they felt that would be it. So yeah, probably won't be something that we dive into too quickly, but you never know. With VR content and other things coming on board, we might find a demand for it, and you guys better believe we will try to supply all that to you guys if it's if something that we think will be useful. Let's catch up here. Let's see. This is from Daniel Lobo. Hey everyone, I'm based in South Africa. Welcome, man. Is it worth me signing up with BMI to handle my USA territory, or do you guys think tax-wise this may not be worth it for me? P.S. So glad I found you guys. My recommendations, if you are international, and meaning that you are outside of the United States, if you plan on working mostly with U.S. libraries in the U.S. market, getting U.S. placements, I do recommend you sign up with BMI, and I recommend them over ASCAP. I do think that they are better for TV film placements in terms of royalties. And the reason being is mostly because of the registration problem, issues that can happen when you are working with multiple PROs. I know I've had some members that, we registered something here through the library with the syndicate, and it's not showing up on their local PRO, even though there's supposed to be this universal system where everybody's communicating, but it just doesn't always happen, and there can be always problems where you have to then go re-register tracks. So if that's happening just in the registration process, I would guess that probably a lot of missing royalties are also happening, right? Because you're having things that have to move, and metadata and Excel sheets and spreadsheets moving between countries, and you're just increasing the odds of things falling through the cracks. So I would recommend, Daniel, if you're planning on working with U.S. companies and working primarily in this market, just go to BMI, because that's a U.S. PRO, and everything's going to be more streamlined for you that way. So that would be my best take on that. I do have a tutorial called How Foreigners Can Get Involved in Sync Licensing, something like that. It's on my YouTube channel. I know I put it in Sync Academy, so if you haven't watched that too, maybe take a watch at that, because I think I talk about some of that stuff more in detail there. All right, we got a question for Trevor. This is from Aurora. I'm currently making 2 tracks a week. I'm worried that I'm getting a bit lazy. So I wanted to ask, what is the ideal amount of tracks a week to get a contract? I make EDM.
It depends on your relationship with the library. Like, because if I were expecting you to make a full album for me, which that's actually not something I do too much. A lot of times I kind of Frankenstein albums together. And so if you're a producer who's, doing 2 or 3 tracks every once in a while. Like that works for me because I can just, throw them when they come in onto places. But other libraries, they like to get full albums. And if you are looking to get with a library that wants to get full albums going,